The product is a service and a DLL that runs on the system that checks every process that starts up that Windows is starting. And so we connect at the very earliest stages of those process starts for Win32 apps and check it against our configured settings. And we can configure it as a whitelist or a blacklist. In this case, I have a whitelist, so I've set up where WordPad is something that is on the whitelist and I'm allowed to run. That opens up fine. But I have other things where if I go to start Windows Media Player, I haven't specifically allowed that, and so I get a pop-up that says this particular process is not allowed for this user. Contact your system administrator. Similarly, I didn't allow Chrome, so Chrome pops up and has that message. So if it's on the whitelist, I'm allowed to run WordPad. I've allowed Explorer, so those will come up. It's what I've defined. Let me disconnect from here, and I will reconnect as an administrator and show you how that's done. We do have an application called the Simplify Console, and that is a program that connects and views a database. So we do have a requirement of a SQL Server database, which contains all of the configuration information about the applications, about the assignments to users, who's allowed to run what, so on and so forth. So this is the management system that's configuring that, and then what you just saw from the user, the service has connected to the database, gets the information for that user, and knows what's it's allowed to run. So I do have applications defined in here. I'm starting over here on the right where the objects are. And so in this case, Chrome, if you notice that one wasn't allowed to start. Let me go here to WordPad. So I've defined a name, an executable, working directory, the basic information about that application. Now, where it gets interesting is over here on the Signatures tab. I can define how I want to check to see if this process is allowed. And so you can check things like using just the executable name, and it can be as simple as that. Or we can also use a hash value. So this is something that we've determined from the process that's on the system. And so that's what we're comparing to. So if a rogue process or a virus has changed WordPad and I haven't come in here and specifically allowed it, then that variant of WordPad.exe will be blocked because it doesn't meet that same hash value. And as you can see, we can define multiple hash values. So there may be multiple versions of this process that are running around in your environment that you know of and you're okay with. So you can set multiple hash values if those are indeed allowed. It does go through and check everything. So if I expand here, you'll see a lot of system processes. These are needed for the basic logon process because Windows is starting up the various system things. And so I've configured it to allow those things so that we can actually get to a point where we can log in and use the system successfully. So that's the configuration that we would do for processes that run on the system. But let's look at how that applies to a user. And we do that over here. We have an Active Directory. So I see a view of my directory, my domain, my OU. I have users and groups in here. I also have computers. So I can define a computer name or client name, can define an IP address range. So these are ways to identify either users or devices that I want to assign these configurations to. In this case, I was logging in as this user, user 10. And under Applications Lockdown, here in the center now, I'm in the assignments tree, I can look at how this user is configured. In this case, I'm using that trusted list or the whitelist. I can inherit, I can use the blacklist. There's a learn mode, so during that initial period where I'm setting this up, I can turn on learn mode to say, all right, don't block anything yet. Let me just get information about the processes that are running. After that, I read them into the database, assign them to the user, and then I can turn on whitelist. It's just a way to help that configuration process. I have defined it for trust list. and now I see items that are on my on that trust list as far as processes that are allowed. And you see it can build, it can inherit. So some of these come from where you see test, that's the test domain. So my user is part of this domain, so it inherits some of those things. Imaginary people is the OU. So it's inherited different applications that are allowed to run. In this case, I've assigned WordPad. And assigning a new one is as simple as grabbing it over here, dragging and dropping for that user, and now Chrome is on that trusted list, and for this particular user, allowed to run. Obviously, I could set it to a group of users, to OUs, anywhere in the directory, so I can have different allowed processes running, even on the same system, based on the user that is logged in. In this case, I will quickly restart that service. Normally not necessary. It's something that polls periodically, but let me just force it for right now. I can go back over to my user and back in my account here. Should still have WordPad that's allowed to run. Media Center can't, but now Google Chrome, I set it to allow, and where it was blocked before, it's now allowed.